Hello everyone, Kirsten here. Today I would like to share a brief video on the power of listening and grief and how they both relate. I've been inspired to make this video because many of my clients come to me with a depression, and as our psychology conversation unravels, it often turns out that underneath the depression is a sense of grief, unresolved grief. And part of my conversations with my clients is really that we cultivate the power of listening. And that is, of course, that in this case, listening is an act of love, an act of generosity. It's an invitation to really listen to my clients or our own inner worlds, our inner worlds of thoughts, feelings, and memories. And to really listen well, we need to have an open heart and an open mind. And that means our heart can feel things, ideally the whole spectrum of life that life evokes in us, which can be grief, it can be sadness, it can be jealousy, it can be joy, it can be excitement, it can be love, it can be peace. So I think an open heart is a heart that is tender and that is able to experience the whole range of feelings that life can evoke in us. And that includes grief and a sense of loss. And also, to listen well, we need to have an open mind, which means a non-judgmental mind, a mind that goes far beyond the judgments of right and wrong and yes and no, that mind that wants to understand and ask curious questions. So in relation to grief, I often meet clients, but also people in life who say, well, for example, yesterday I met a lovely woman on a dog walk who had lost her dog, one of her dogs, 2 weeks ago. And she was tearful, and we talked a bit about her dog and what had happened. And she was crying a few tears. And I said to her, I really feel for you. I love my dog. I have such a deep connection with my own little dog. I would be bereft and heartbroken if she died. And the woman said, do you know what? My dog died a couple of weeks ago and I should be over by now. I should pull myself together and I should be over it by now. And this, I thought, is not an uncommon judgment, that grief needs to be felt within a certain time, packed away, and off we go. And this is not how grief works, but this is a judgment of the feeling of vulnerability. And this is often in the way of actually grieving. So grief, whether we lose a dog or a beloved person or a pet, or whether we have a miscarriage, or whether our children move away from us because they're growing up or they're going to university or leaving home, these are all natural kind of losses in a way. And these are all natural, they evoke natural grieving processes. So grieving is a natural response to loss, and that will evoke feelings, intense feelings at times, depending on the kind of loss, of sadness, of anger, of confusion, of feeling lost, certainly feeling vulnerable, missing the dog, or missing, maybe if it was a miscarriage, missing the life we had imagined we'd have with this baby, with our child. I think our own judgment of our vulnerability really often gets in the way of actually the grieving process. So grief is a natural feeling. It runs its own course. And our feelings actually, whether this is grief or any other feeling, only want to be felt. They want to be felt. They want to be understood. They want to be expressed. And then they can leave again. They can flow out of our experience. And depending on the emotional investment we had on what we have lost, it might be a really long-term marriage. It might be, like I said, a baby that's growing in our womb. It might be a dog. It might be our youth. It might be our health. It could be anything. So depending on the emotional investment and connection we had with the person or the pet or the process, the grief will be less or more intense and turbulent. So the grief is like a river that needs to flow, and we need to, if we want to process our grief, make space for this river to flow. But often our own judgment that we should be over by now, or we shouldn't be that upset, blocks the natural process and makes it much harder to actually grieve and make space for that grief, and then to almost allow a process of renewal again after grief, which is often followed by grief. Important, maybe I'll just leave you with a few tips if you are experiencing grief or a loss and you feel vulnerable and intense feelings. It's important to make space for these feelings. It's important to say, what am I actually feeling? To name the feeling, to identify the feeling, which is already a part of taming the feeling, of regulating the feeling. So naming the feeling, taming the feeling, that's an important part. Facilitating the flow of the feeling. Yeah, it might be that you might like walks in nature and feel the feeling. That means it can be felt and it can be released. So that's an important part of a grieving process as well. But you can say, what am I feeling? How strongly am I feeling this feeling, let's say on a scale from 1 to 10? It might be 2, it might be 10, so it might be mild or quite intense. And there is an inner wisdom in all of us that knows when the grieving is complete. You will feel it once you have facilitated the process. There will be a completion point, and you'll just listen. You can listen to the answer. You know when it's complete, because you will not feel as intensely anymore. So these are just a few ideas about the connection between good listening as an act of love towards ourselves and grief. So maybe the takeaway points is that grief is a natural response to loss, and also grief will run its course. It needs to be felt and understood and facilitated. And also, I think it is really important not to judge our vulnerability, which really is an obstacle. It's kind of putting almost a blockage in the process of grief, which we don't want. So, once the process is complete, we have a renewed energy. We've probably learned a lot about our inner life, because grieving is an important part of life. It's an important capacity, because our lives are full of opportunities, full of new experiences, but it's also marked by natural losses. Some losses are natural, some losses are unexpected, and I think we do ourselves a great service if we can develop our inner capacity to grieve. It's very important in our lives.